Hello, everybody. This is a Walk for Change interview. I'm Bobby Rodrigo. I'm your host. Happy to be here. Walk the number 4 change.us, empowering people for human rights. Walk for Change is an action where we are going to walk across the country. The main body is going to start in California in June, walk across the country, wind up in Washington, D.C. in September, joining other walks as they meet up in D.C., one that'll go through Kansas and Missouri and the center of the country, and another one that'll come from Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then there'll be other parallel walks in Mexico and in Canada, and then also there's one planned in Australia. And of course, that one will not come to DC, only virtually, which of course is wonderful. Everybody will be there in spirit. We want to know why you walk for change. Why I walk for change is my reasons. Why you walk for change is your reasons. We want to stop the oppression and the tyrannies that are happening in our government. We want to advance equal rights, to promote criminal justice reform, to end prohibition, to fix our food problem, food to the table particularly, liberty and justice for all, addressing homelessness, Native American rights, veteran care and homelessness, and veterans' rights, a number of platforms. And we're not just walking across the country, waving signs and holding banners and doing cadence. We are bringing legislation, policy, directives. We are approaching the FDA, the USDA. We are doing it locally, at the state level, and nationally as we go across the country. So everywhere that we go, we're going to have something in our hand to bring to the table. We want to talk to our elected officials. We, more importantly, want to empower people for human rights. We want to empower communities. We want everybody to join. We want to know what you want to see changed for yourself, for your community, for your state, nationally. Very, very happy to have a candidate for president on our show today. She is running for president of the Libertarian Party. And just like any other candidate, we like to let everybody know what people stand for, and hopefully they will bring a platform that resonates with you and the things that you believe need to be changed in our society. So without further ado, please welcome Sorinne Ardeleanu, candidate for president of the Libertarian Party. Hello, Sorinne. How are you?
I'm well, Bobby. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Taking time out of your day. I want our audience to get to know you and to hear what you are about, what your platform is, and these other projects. You know, I was talking a little bit about what the Walk for Change was as we were getting started, and I know that we're gonna talk about a few areas that you overlap throughout the platform of the Walk for Change. And of course, the Walk for Change is very personal, like liberty is, at least for me. And if I understand you, it is for you. But first, so tell everybody who you are and where you're from and how you got to be a presidential candidate. Make you tick, Sorinne.
Well, I'm a human being first and foremost. And what got me here, I had a realization about 20 years ago that if I was going to make a positive impact in the world, that I had to be in a position where I could influence our values. I realized that the President of the United States is in the perfect position to influence values because the President of the United States gets to be in the media. The President of the United States is considered an authority figure by many, also considered a role model, and has the potential to influence our education curriculums. And that's really where our values come from, I've realized over the years. I actually have a degree in psychology, and I'm in a very advanced program right now. So I understand how the mind works. I understand how people are hypnotized and magnetized. And I've realized that most people don't even have their own thoughts. And so I realized that there's a way to influence people with integrity, to free people, because many people are enslaved by ideas that somebody else put in their mind. And so they're not even making their own decisions. And so about a decade ago, it started becoming very clear to me that I was going to be in the 2020 election. And it scared me because I was like,
I'm sure.
I thought about this 20 years ago, and then it started like getting more pressing and more pressing and pressing, and people that didn't know me started seeing the same thing and telling me that I was going to be running for president. And I never shared this with anybody because I have a past. Again, I'm a human being. That means
Sure.
I'm not perfect. I'm
Sure.
trying, but nobody is ever going to be perfect. And I grew up in very what some would call impoverished circumstances, where both of my parents were immigrants from communist countries, and I lived mostly with my mother until I was about 14. And I grew up on public services, actually. And my mom had this constant fear of making $1 too much, or she would lose everything and she wouldn't be able to take care of me. So I understand how the current system keeps people down from actually realizing their full potential, from doing greater things. And I'm really grateful that I decided I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my dad. They're wonderful people, but they're still struggling. They're still enslaved by the system that they risked their lives for, that they thought would be better than communism. And in many ways it is. Because they get to believe what they want to believe, right? But there are still a lot of handicaps along the way that our government has implemented that I believe, as president, I can clear so that everybody truly has the opportunity to thrive if they're willing to do the work.
You covered some areas, and I'll go back to a few of them. That was marvelous. The first thing that I found interesting was the 10-year journey. You mentioned psychology and then the influence of the president. And the first thing that popped into my mind was the bully pulpit. Again, a phrase that has been marketed to us essentially. If you're not being a bully, then it shouldn't be called the bully pulpit per se. But this is something that's been marketed as. My issue with politics, that there are many, is one is our society tends to worship a little bit too much of elected officials, in my view. Of course, sports figures, Hollywood, a bunch of areas, but we tend to worship elected officials. It is actually, in the last 10 years for me, let's say, at least 10, I've really been a voice against this, particularly with my friends. I wanted to get your insight on how you feel about that.
Sure, I agree with you. I feel that we have a culture that values and is obsessed with fame. And this is why I stress on the fact that I'm human. We're all human. Everybody has imperfections. And when you idolize somebody, you take away your own power, and you also take away your reasoning abilities. We have, people that believe everything that their idol says without question. And they will do, just crazy things because they trust this person. They think that they're perfect. They forget that they're human as well. And so I really try to keep myself in check. I have had my own issues where I've idolized spiritual teachers. And I've had my heart broken when I realized they're human too. And that at the end of the day, I have to set the standard of what is good and bad, and not compare myself to anybody else, and not put anybody above me or below me, to realize that everybody is on their own path. Everybody has their own challenges. Everybody is in a different place. And that all I can do is lead by example. I can't force my way on others. And I can consider what others are doing, but I have to realize that they're going on a different path than I am. And so what works for them isn't necessarily going to work for me or anybody else. And so reasoning is something that I've been working on in the past 10 years, learning how to do that correctly, because that's something that most of us aren't taught how to do either. And that's why it's so easy to idolize people that are famous, to put them on pedestals. Also, I think we live in a culture that wants to be distracted from reality
Mm.
because it's fun, right? It's fun
Mm.
to go to a game and get caught up in that excitement, or go to a show or whatever and forget about your life and not work on it. Forget about your pain and just in the moment feel good. But what I've realized is that when you actually work on yourself, when you are in touch with reality, you create a sense of peace that nobody can take away from you. And it's so much more worth the effort versus constantly surrounding yourself with distractions.
Yeah, that's said very well. I support what you're saying. It's a great narrative, to say the least. Great way to live. Actually, it's really not a narrative. It's a great way to live, in my opinion. It is, the distractions are even more than just the worshiping. Of course, we see deflection and distraction all the time. The media and our elected officials are pretty much working in concert that way. I give an example for being a journalist. I'll look at an article or watch a show. Let's say, well, I don't watch anybody, so I'll read an article, and the first thing it'll say is, the Democratic Senator Charles Schumer or Republican Congressman Thomas Massey, let's say, and just the way they write the title just shuts down half the population. Instead of just saying Senator so-and-so or Congressperson, Congresswoman, Congressman so-and-so, they started with the party aspect of it to keep the division. It's really contrived, in my opinion, that they do that. That they call it clickbait, I guess. I don't. I really call it a divisive, conspiracy, I suppose. They make a lot of money off of us being mad at each other, and instead of getting to the issues. And I'm mad at the media because of it, because journalistic standards, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat or Libertarian from a journalist standpoint. I'm a journalist. That's what you're supposed to do. And it seems like they're working in concert to keep us mad. I wanted to get your input on that.
You just tapped into two very big things. So one of the first things I learned in my undergraduate psychology studies was that I could get into advertising with a psychology degree.
Sure.
Right? Because I was learning how to manipulate behavior. So advertisers do know what they're doing. It takes as little as 33 seconds to hypnotize a person if they're in the right state of mind. The other thing that you tapped into that's very, very big is labels. So I've always been a very fluid person. I've never liked labels because I'm always evolving. I'm always changing. And labels do separate us. And some people are going to get offended by this, but I'm just being honest here. Worrying about being politically correct all the time is actually creating a greater divide. We're all human beings. We're all fluid. And when we try to box ourselves in, we actually limit ourselves in what we can become and experience in life. So I think it's really important for people to be as respectful as possible, but also just not to take things personally. If somebody says something to you that you don't like, realize it's a reflection on them and not you. Know who you are, own who you are, but don't box yourself. Realize that everybody is dynamic. That nobody is exclusive from that, and you can try to keep yourself in that box, but you're going to restrict yourself. And I believe that this is what leads to a lot of functional diseases in the world.
Yeah, I'm not a label person either. That's another, as I'm sure you could tell. I can't stand it. Again, it's contrived division almost, particularly I guess more so now because they use it against us, as you described, than maybe in the past where I didn't mind it as much. But when you think about the big picture, we've been led down this road since we're come out of the womb, essentially, the way that society is set up. And it's interesting that that's been happening. You mentioned your parents, and when you were talking about the system, this is something that I've reported on over the years, many years, and advocated on. And let's see, probably 2000, let's see, Obama was 2000, so 2009 or 2010, I was at a conference with the American Bar Association in a tax conference. And I was in Las Vegas, and the very first panel was about low-income tax credit. So what I learned, I was blown away by it. I didn't expect it. What I learned, and it fits your narrative, or you're just not your narrative. I got to stop using that word. It fits your example of being locked into the system and worrying about the dollar. So what has been happening was there was about 800,000 people nationally that were given tax penalties because when they set up their Affordable Care Act, which of course was a tax, when they set up their Affordable Care Act at X, this is what I'm going to make this year, so this is what I'm entitled to. And if they went out and made more money, which we want to do, which is something that, you know, we strive to be better ourselves, and they reported it honestly with integrity, they were then given a tax assessment that they had to pay because of the difference in what they said they were going to make and this now new amount. And then if they didn't pay it in a lump sum, they were given a penalties. Now we're talking about people that are in the poverty level. This, and I'm sitting, this is the very first panel, and I'm just sitting, my jaw hit the ground. And I met some very, very good people that day, Frank Agostino, for example, in the tax world, and the taxpayer advocate, the very first one that we've ever had. And actually, she just retired last year. And I was blown away. And it fits what you gave an example of, because this has been going on for a long time. If you didn't jump from, let's say, $15,000 a year to now 50, and you worked your way up, you got hammered and you wound up in a worse situation than what you were in by staying at the level that your parents were dealing with, and you saw it firsthand. Talk more about that, please.
It's disempowering, really. I mean, it's my father didn't do public assistance. He had too much pride for that. But my mother did, because she wanted to take care of me and didn't believe in herself as much as my father did. And just, I love my mother. I want the best for her. You know, we haven't had the healthiest relationship in the past. So this comes from a place of love. But I'm speaking of her because I know there are other people like her that never became anything greater, because, like I said, they get penalized if they make even just $1 too much. And the thing is, like in a place in San Francisco, people that are making $250,000 can qualify for government subsidies because it's so expensive to live here, right? It's all relative. So even if a person is making $50,000 a year here, they're barely getting by. And so to take away something from those people, for actually moving themselves forward, doesn't encourage them to move forward, and so it keeps them down. Now, I'm not saying to continue these services, by the way, in the long run, because my vision is to reduce taxes and to equalize taxes where, you know, people and businesses pay the same rates. There, you know, because right now what we have is class discrimination as far as tax rates go. And so I want to allow people to pay less taxes, and so that we can privatize a lot of the services that government is doing, because with privatization, it's more efficient. So there can be services that can actually help people like my mom get on their feet. You know, she's close to retirement now, so it doesn't apply to her. But, you know, people that when she was in her 20s, you know, like she spent her whole life, you know, living in fear almost because of the way the system was set up. And she never really actualized or became whatever greatness she could have been because of the system that gives you just enough to get by, but punishes you if you do better, you know, and doesn't, it's like putting somebody on training wheels, you know, but only for like a day or two, you know, and then just, you know, the first time they're okay without them, you just let them fall, right? Like you need to help them. You don't just let them go right away. You keep holding them.
It's one thing to have a social safety net. It's another to engulf people inside of a system where they can't escape from it. There's really different things there.
It's almost cruel, you know. It's just like, we want to help you, but not so much that you're actually able to make something great out of yourself. And like I said, this really kills the human spirit. And I know there are many other people, especially single mothers, that are living like this. They just want to provide for their children, but the government only gives them so much under these terms, and if they do better, they lose everything, and they're worried about their children, so they put their children first, and this is what their children learn as well.
Yeah.
And I consider myself very fortunate because I broke this pattern. I didn't allow it to carry on. But this is also why we have generations and generations of people who do live on public services.
Because that's what they know.
Yeah.
They don't know anything else. Absolutely. From the standpoint of basic civics, for example, or this, you mentioned education earlier, the way that education is done, okay, you must do it this way or it doesn't work. Well, that's ridiculous. People need to be empowered so they can follow their own path as best. I'm total advocate of that. I believe that you are as well.
And yes, indeed I am.
I offer to you, I'm the co-founder of an organization called We Do Better. And We Do Better is about, we do better than the government in providing public services to the people. It is a tax model. And I encourage you to check it out. I'm no longer with We Do Better. I now do We Do Better Relief and some others. But the We Do Better model, I was fortunate enough to create with some wonderful people. And it is about empowering communities and in providing directing tax dollars to where they deliver public services best to the community. So I believe you'll love it. Actually, I see the heart behind you, so I think you'll love it. So you mentioned to me earlier, and I'm not going to tell anybody, I'm going to let you do it. It's your platform. So you have the 3 L's. So tell everybody about the 3 L's.
Yeah, so actually, I guess this answers your very first question. So what drives me?
Yeah.
Love, logic, and liberty.
Okay, so everybody here catch that. Love, logic, and liberty. I don't think anybody should have any problems with those things. Tell us about it.
Sure. So as far as love goes, and we talked about this beforehand, the golden rule is very important for people to follow, to really treat others the way that they want to be treated. But the shortcoming that I see behind this is that many people, unfortunately, because of the way they've been treated, might believe that they're not actually worthy of being loved. And so they don't love themselves, and so they're not able to love others. And so it's important to be able to love yourself so that you're able to love others. And also, we teach people how to treat us. So if you treat yourself with love and respect, others will treat you with love and respect. This is all happening at a subconscious level. It's just automatically, we can feel like this person loves themselves, this person honors themselves, so they must be worthy of my love and honor too. The other thing about love, when you love others, this is something I had to overcome because I had a lot of trauma in my early childhood. I was abused pretty much every day of my life till I ran away from home when I was 14. And that was why I started looking at values about 20 years ago. I wanted to save everybody from going through what I went through. I didn't want anybody to have to go through the kind of pain that I went through. And that's why I was wondering what influences our behaviors in the first place. And I spent many years not wasting my energy because I learned from it ultimately, but realizing, and what I realized was that you can't save somebody who isn't willing to save themselves. You can't do something for somebody that they're not willing to do for themselves. And this is where logic comes in, is that, yes, I want everybody to have free healthcare and free education and all these things for free, but they're not really free, and not everybody is able to, or willing to receive these things. And so what I've realized about life is that it tests each and every single one of us. Life is not supposed to be easy. Life is full of challenges and tests, and if you're willing to overcome them, life will get easier, and you will be able to overcome the challenges that come forward with ease as well. But this is again why logic is so important, that many people don't know how to reason correctly. It's not their fault, and I'm not saying this as an insult because I do believe in everybody's potential, but I believe it's really important for people to learn how to be logical, not emotional, right? It's great to be loving, but love without logic is a disaster, and liberty is really about everybody having the freedom to choose how they live their life. And I believe that when everybody has the freedom to choose to live life the way they want, and if they use love and logic, that they will all prosper and have thriving lives. So that's really the essence. Yeah, don't interfere with others, mind your own business, and don't let others interfere with you.
Yeah, absolutely. The Liberty side of this marvelous platform, the Liberty side of it, to me, and this is actually said to me by one of my colleagues a while ago, and I thought it was obvious but profound because I hadn't thought of it myself. But it was obvious. It's if one gets into a debate on any issue, essentially, and they turn liberty on themselves, apply liberty to themselves, liberty always wins. And it really helps establish what liberty is about, in my opinion. Make it personal, because everything should be personal, in my opinion, when it comes to those things. And again, liberty also is about no labels and all those other wonderful things that we tend to put ourselves in a box, in my opinion. And you were talking about logic and those next steps, and one of the things that all of that discusses is no force as well. So talk about force.
It doesn't work. So, well, it is freedom is a basic principle of life. And I like to compare us adults to children, because we're really, we're just big children. And the reason I say that is, think about like when you're a child and your parents try to force you to do something. You want to rebel, you resent them, you don't understand why, because they're not reasoning with you. And so force is not an effective way to actually influence behavior in a lasting manner. And again, this is why logic is important. If you could reason with somebody and help them come to that own conclusion that what you want them to do is actually in their best interest, they're more inclined to do that, versus if you tell them like the right thing for you to do is to pay more taxes for people who are making poor decisions in their life, right? Like, people are going to resent that, versus you saying, there are people out there that are suffering in pain, and perhaps there's something that you can do that can help them, that can inspire them to want better for themselves, to do better for themselves, right? It's a little bit more effort, but it is more sustainable, and it is a way to actually influence people with integrity if you want to make a positive impact in the world.
Well, most people, and I agree with you, but most people support educating others. Now, obviously, that could mean an education that includes force, doesn't include force, can anything. But what you're talking about is educating more than anything else, and that is a positive message usually. Have you seen it that way for the most part, or what is your experience there?
Well, as you're saying that, I want to clarify. I'm talking about leading by example, right? You can't teach something to somebody else truly if you haven't mastered it yourself, because you don't understand what it's like to be a master of something. You can only talk about it in theory. And the other thing, like, I'm very into science, and I believe everything is energy. And I believe you and I and everyone in the world is vibrating at their own unique frequency, and that your frequency actually influences people a lot more than your words. And so if you're living a certain life, again, this is my psychology background, you influence people at a subconscious level as well, just by what the frequency is that you're emitting out into the sphere. Right? And that's why it's so important to hold yourself to high standards and to walk your own talk, so that you can make a positive impact. It's there's a saying that I really don't like, and it's, those who can't do teach, but I actually believe that only masters should be teaching.
And let's clarify a few things on the vibratory comments that you made. This is not some abstract, this is real. I happen to know a lot more about it lately because of a psychiatrist, a friend of mine, colleague as well, who just created a device that works on vibrations to basically stabilize your body's energy and having it flow correctly. And it is not something that is crazy, conspiratorial, or anything, or silly, or anything like that. This is something that is proven science, as you mentioned. You talk about science.
Yeah, there's technology that's been around at least since the 50s, and I've seen some of it and played with it. But even as recently as last year, MIT they came out with some technology where they can predict your thoughts within 10 seconds of asking you a question. Like, but before they even ask you the question, they know what your answer is going to be. It's like a 90% accuracy, because it's the frequency, it's the energy, you know, the suggestion. They know the question ahead of time, right? They're thinking about it. Because it's all communicating subconsciously happens faster than you know, light traveling. And you know, technology is just catching up. There's so many things that we humans, imperfect humans, are still learning, you know, and that's the thing, is we have to be open to them. And I'm glad to be alive today because we have the technology to back it up.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I know the wearables are actually being, the wearables, where am I going with that? Is something that is being used to show and tell this particular aspect of life. You know, they're using wearables for therapy, for vibratory therapy, for example, which is what David Rabin is doing, is one of the many people that are in that area. So it is real. So getting back to your platform, what is next for you as far as making sure everybody votes for you for president?
So being an outlier, running with an outlier group, I realized that my number one goal right now is getting mainstream name recognition, so that people know who I am and they know what I'm about, and really getting an opportunity to meet with as many people as possible, to understand them better and to show them what my gifts are. Because I realized that there are unfortunately many people today that know how to talk correctly, but don't actually mean the words that they say. And it's easier to feel this whether they are authentic or not in person. And so I want the opportunity to connect with people so that they know that I am real, that I am qualified, that I understand life, that I understand how to help people, that I'm very logical, loving, and that liberty for all is really what matters the most for me, and that I'm committed to this vision, you know, beyond, you know, presidency. You know, this is something that I've dedicated my life to. You know, many years ago, I realized, like, I want to improve the quality of life for all. And so running for office and winning the election is just, you know, these are steps. You know, this doesn't happen overnight. You know, this doesn't stop with just our country, because every human being deserves freedom. Every human being deserves to feel love. Every human being deserves to learn, you know, how to use logic correctly.
So let's play a little word association game with the psychologist. So I'll give you some phrases relative to our country and our politics and our government, and you give me your platform answer, if that would work for you.
Sure.
All right, so let's start with the military-industrial complex.
I think this is something that we need to scale down on massively. I do not believe that the way to peace is through war or force. I believe that is through communication and through understanding. And I believe that there are much better uses of our money than on basically forcing our way and controlling others.
Money in politics.
Let's get it out. Actually, my strategy for this campaign is I want to run the leanest winning campaign in the history of the United States of America. I want this to be as organic as possible, because people shouldn't be spending money on campaigns. People should be spending that money directly in their communities, helping people, helping causes that are near and dear to their hearts, instead of helping people spend money on advertising. And because at the end of the day, there's only one winner in this election.
Criminal justice reform.
Wonderful. So I am an advisory board member of a criminal justice reform group out of New York. It's called It Could Happen to You. And they helped pass historical legislation last year holding prosecutors accountable. So I'm a huge advocate in transparency and in accountability. I've worked with exonerees, and I've gotten to learn a lot about the suffering that they go through and how much, unfortunately, prosecutors want to win cases regardless of evidence. And the consequences that society pays and these innocent people pay, as well as other people that are harmed because prosecutors don't do their job. Obviously, this is just a small percentage of prosecutors. I believe that most people want to do the right thing, but this is something that needs to be addressed. All aspects of criminal justice, we need to make sure that there is accountability, that everybody is doing the right thing, following the steps, not eager to close a case, to let the real criminals get away. And the other aspect of this is that the punishments that we have are not always or usually even appropriate. We're not reforming people. We're not, especially with my background in psychology, teaching people new ways to experience life. They go into prison or jail for however long of time, and they come out not always better. Some of them are worse because they've been around the same kind of people and they're coming up with similar schemes. Or even if they want better, they never learn better. And so they have no choice but to go back and do the same thing. So it's just, we're not addressing the causes of these behaviors, we're addressing the effects of the behaviors. And so it's really difficult for people who are, who do things that aren't right, to do the right thing when they do come out. And so we need a better system that addresses this, that helps these people do better. One of my colleagues who's been wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for about 13 years now, he started a nonprofit because he realized there's a lot of really talented incarcerated people in prison. And guilty or not, that when they come out of there, some of them actually do have great skills, like they're artists or chefs or musicians. And he wants to create a movement where they're entrepreneurs when they come out, that they're employers when they come out, and instead of, burdens to society. So there is a shift already happening, and I'm on board with that. It's really about reasoning correctly and addressing the causes of behaviors that are harmful to society versus just, punishing the effects.
Excellent. Let's see. Technology.
It's a great tool, but it disconnects us from reality. And a lot of times we're very eager to move faster than nature would, and there are unintended consequences of this that we aren't prepared for. So I think it's very important that we move slowly, that we do our due diligence, before we release something to the market, to really understand it. I feel like a lot of technology today is driven by the ego. The creators just want to make money, or they want power, or sometimes it comes from a really genuine place that they want to do good. But to just release something to the general public before understanding the full consequences, I believe is dangerous, and there is no need for that. That there's a lot that we can learn from nature, that we're not, the more, again, we talked about distractions earlier with, famous people. Technology is the same thing. It disconnects us from each other. It disconnects us from reality. It makes us feel isolated. It makes us feel lonely. It makes us feel like we need more stuff, when really we need to be more in touch with ourselves, more in touch with each other, more connected to our communities, helping each other out, because that's where our true fulfillment and our true answers are.
Caring for our environment.
Vital. We cannot exist without a thriving environment. Humans absolutely need to respect the environment. I do not believe that governments should be pushing certain agendas, because we have a lot of theories, unfortunately, about what's causing this and what's causing that. But we as human beings need to use common sense and understand that when it's time for our species to leave this planet, the planet will heal, it will survive, it will move forward, but we won't. And so we really need to respect the environment so that we can enjoy it longer, and so that, our children, or their children, and so on can enjoy it for as long as possible, really.
Cannabis prohibition.
It's, whatever you want to do, it's your body, it's none of my business. As long as you're not harming anybody else, go for it. I believe there are definitely very positive uses for marijuana, for cannabis, and there are also negative. Everything has a positive and a negative aspect to it, so it's really up to the person to decide if it's right for them or not.
So, I think that covers a good amount of stuff. Absolutely. So now everybody knows where you stand on a number of issues. So getting to know Sorinne, the non-candidate, you mentioned your criminal justice reform project, which is a marvelous project. I definitely love that. And when we visit again, we're going to go down that rabbit hole a little bit further. But you are involved in some other projects, and I want you to tell everybody about them. I know you're doing something at the Ever Evolving Man. Is that what that's called?
Yeah, so I started a project last year called the Ever Evolving Man. And I was inspired to create this educational series of modern day men who walk their talks, because I felt like there was a shortage of positive male role models in the media. And so I wanted to show the world men who hold themselves to high standards, who are open to sharing their journeys, what they've overcome, what led them to where they are today, to provide positive role models for men in our Western world, to contrast the negative role models that we have in the world. Because again, like I mentioned, I'm running because I believe this is the greatest way I can influence values. And the media is one of the places that we get many of our values from, because our subconscious mind is wide open when we're being entertained. And so I figured, here's a way I can, again, influence behavior with integrity. I'm going to raise some men up that are accessible. So I've worked with best-selling author Michael Gelb, and I'm actually part of the conscious capitalism movement with him. I've worked with Dr. Bernie Siegel. He's a best-selling author and a healer. I've worked with a few different people that are famous. I did a similar series a few years prior called Destined for Success, where I taught people how to reprogram their bodies and minds to go from surviving to thriving. So this isn't my first time doing something like this, but I'm a lot pickier who I'm featuring this time, because my first time I was just learning and I didn't realize the impact I could make. And the second time I'm doing this, I'm like, I'm going to make sure that I don't care if all these people are famous or not. I just want to make sure that they truly are positive role models, because that's what we need to put out into the world, is to show people that there are men that have courage to be their most authentic selves and that are successful by doing so as well.
That's fantastic. So Sorinne, tell everybody how they can find you, both with your presidential campaign and with your other projects.
Sure. So I have a website. It's really easy. It's Sorinne2020.com. And I actually, I got 3 websites with my name misspelled. So if people misspell it, they'll still find me. But if you just go to Sorinne, SORINNE, 2020.com, you'll get there. Or if you go to Sorinne, like Serenity Now, Sorinne2020.com, it'll forward you to the right address as well. As far as the Ever Evolving Man goes, the best way is just to follow me on social media. I'm the only Sorinne Ardeleanu in the world. If you look for Sorinne 2020, you'll find me everywhere. It's kind of hard to hide.
Fantastic. So everybody, love, logic, and liberty with Sorinne Ardeleanu. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to more conversations, and I'm happy to know you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today.
So I was really, really glad to meet Sorinne Ardeleanu and discuss these important issues with you. And hopefully she has given you some insight into her platform, where you can take an interest and see what she's about and learn more about what she stands for. There's, of course, so many other issues that the presidential candidates are addressing. That if any of them resonate with you, then go out and support them for sure. Remember, everybody, the walk, the number 4, change.us, walkforchange.us. Empowering people for human rights. I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for joining me for the Walk for Change interview today.